Your soulmate is not who they pretend to be. In reality, your soulmate is my beloved child. Something beneath the surface has finally begun to reveal itself. And before your mind tries to predict where this is going, stay with me, because the person you have been thinking about may be very different from the version they have allowed the world to see. There is a reason certain pieces never seem to fit. The way they could appear completely confident one moment, then strangely thoughtful the next. The way they sometimes seemed ready to say something important, only to replace it with an ordinary sentence. The way their energy around you felt different, as though behind every simple conversation, another conversation was silently waiting. You noticed it. Maybe you couldn't explain it. But something inside you kept whispering, there is more to this person. And you were right. Your soulmate is not necessarily pretending because they want to mislead you. That is the first twist you need to understand. Sometimes people create a version of themselves because the truth feels too valuable to reveal before they know who can truly understand it. Stay a little longer, because this changes the meaning of everything. The personality everyone recognizes may only be their outer layer. Behind it is someone far more observant, far more intentional, and far more aware of you than you may realize. They remember details they pretend to forget. They notice changes they never mention. They replay certain conversations long after those conversations have ended. And whenever your name enters their thoughts, something inside them begins questioning the future they once imagined for themselves. But here is where the mystery deepens. They have been hiding one particular side of themselves, not only from you, but from almost everyone. And it is not what you would expect. Don't skip this moment, because the smallest detail may become the biggest clue. Imagine someone standing in a crowded room while everyone believes they understand exactly who that person is. People know their smile, their habits, their public personality, their ordinary routines. Yet nobody sees the private dream quietly growing behind their eyes. Nobody sees the plans. Nobody sees the questions. Nobody sees the future they have secretly begun imagining. And somehow, you are connected to that future. What if the person you thought was uncertain has actually been thinking several steps ahead? What if their silence wasn't emptiness? What if it was preparation? Because your soulmate may be approaching a moment when maintaining the old version of themselves becomes impossible. The mask isn't falling because something negative is coming. It is falling because authenticity is becoming stronger than hesitation. And when that happens, you may finally understand why their behavior sometimes seemed contradictory. They weren't simply confused about you. They were discovering something about themselves. Pause on that. Because the real revelation isn't only about who your soulmate secretly is. It is about who they become when they stop pretending. Something has been changing quietly within them. Their priorities are shifting. Their idea of connection is becoming deeper. Things that once impressed them no longer feel as important. They are beginning to ask questions about meaning, loyalty, purpose, and the kind of person they want beside them when their future becomes real. And your presence keeps appearing inside those questions. You might miss the turning point if you leave now. Because there is one clue that exposes almost everything. Whenever they imagine showing their completely unfiltered self, there is one person whose reaction matters more than anyone else's. Yours. That is why they hesitate. Not because the truth is something to fear, but because being truly understood can feel more powerful than simply being admired. Your soulmate doesn't only want someone who likes the version everyone sees. Deep inside, they are wondering whether you could recognize the person underneath it. And this is where their secret identity begins to take shape. They may appear ordinary on the outside, but internally, they are becoming a builder of a completely different future, someone preparing to leave behind an old version of life and step towards something more authentic, purposeful, and emotionally real. But even that is not the complete answer. There is another layer. A detail they haven't shown yet. And once that piece becomes visible, you may look back at every strange pause, every unfinished sentence, and every unexpected moment between you and realize they were pointing toward the same truth all along. Before you go, remember this line. Sometimes the greatest revelation about a person isn't discovering that everything you knew was false. It is discovering that everything you knew was only the first chapter. And your soulmate's next chapter? That is where their real identity begins to emerge. Now the hidden pattern starts making sense, because one detail changes the entire picture. Your soulmate has spent more time protecting their real nature than revealing it, and the surprising part is that most people around them have accepted the surface version without ever questioning what exists underneath. But you did. Something about them never felt completely explained. Maybe it was the way their words sometimes sounded casual while their expression carried something deeper. Maybe it was how they could distance themselves from an emotional moment, then quietly return with unexpected attention. Or perhaps it was simply that strange feeling that their biggest truth was always sitting one sentence away from being spoken. Stay with this, because that unfinished sentence matters. Your soulmate has been living between two versions of themselves. One version knows how to function in the world. It knows what to say, when to smile, how to appear unaffected, and how to keep personal dreams protected from unnecessary opinions. But the second version? That person is different. That person thinks deeply about connection. That person imagines possibilities nobody else knows about. That person has begun questioning whether the life everyone expects them to choose is actually the life they want. And somehow, thoughts of you keep appearing whenever those questions become serious. Here is the unexpected part. They may have tried to convince themselves that you were simply another chapter. Someone they could understand, place neatly into their story, and then continue forward without everything changing. But it didn't work. Because you triggered something they weren't prepared to examine. Awareness. Not obsession. Not fantasy. Awareness. You made them notice the difference between being seen and being truly understood. And once someone recognizes that difference, returning to shallow connections becomes difficult. Don't skip what comes next, because this is where their hidden identity begins moving closer to the surface. Your soulmate may actually be a quiet visionary, someone who appears to live completely in the present while secretly constructing possibilities far ahead in their mind. They think about what could exist. What could change. Who they could become. And recently, one question has become impossible for them to ignore. What if the future I really want requires me to finally become the person I've been hiding? That question changed something. Suddenly, old expectations started feeling smaller. Certain opinions stopped carrying the same weight. And the identity they created to satisfy everyone else began feeling less comfortable. Wait until you understand the next piece. Because you are not being presented as someone who must rescue or complete them. Their transformation belongs to them. But your presence may have reminded them that authenticity is possible. That being understood doesn't require performing. That the right connection doesn't demand a perfect image. And somewhere inside that realization, they began imagining what it would feel like to finally speak without editing themselves. If this message reminds you of someone, you can share it with someone who might connect with it too. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe if you enjoy following mysteries like this as they unfold. Now stay close, because we haven't reached the revelation yet. There is still one contradiction. If your soulmate truly wants authenticity, why haven't they revealed everything already? Because transformation usually happens internally before anyone can see it externally. Think about sunrise. The horizon begins changing before the sun becomes visible. And something similar is happening here. Their decisions are changing before their words do. Their priorities are changing before their circumstances do. Their vision is changing before anyone around them realizes that the old version of this person is slowly becoming outdated. Something huge is waiting beneath that shift. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that pretending to be smaller, simpler, or less emotionally aware than they really are cannot continue forever. Sooner or later, truth asks for space. And when they finally give it that space, you may discover that the person you thought you knew was only their introduction. Because behind the familiar personality is someone preparing to become a creator of their own path. A person willing to question expectations, redesign their future, and finally choose authenticity over appearance. But even quiet visionary isn't the final answer. There is one more identity hidden beneath it. One they may not fully understand themselves yet. And the strangest clue is this. It has something to do with why meeting you changed the direction of their thinking in the first place. Stay till the next turning point. Because once that connection is revealed, the title will stop sounding like a mystery. And start sounding like an explanation. Here is the piece nobody around them has noticed yet, the change has already started. Not loudly. Not in a way that would make everyone immediately ask questions. It began through tiny decisions, private realizations, and moments when your soulmate suddenly stopped accepting the version of life they once thought they had to follow. And there is something unusual about the timing. Because the more they started understanding themselves, the more one memory kept returning. You. Not simply your face or your name, but something you represented to them. Possibility. Stay a little longer, because this is where the mystery moves beyond appearances. Your soulmate once believed they needed certainty before they could make an important emotional choice. They wanted every question answered first. Every possibility understood. Every outcome neatly arranged. Then something shifted. They realized the future doesn't always arrive with instructions. Sometimes it begins with recognition. A moment when someone enters your awareness and suddenly reveals parts of you that were sleeping. And that may be what happened here. Your soulmate started noticing qualities within themselves that they had kept quiet for years. Courage they rarely used. Dreams they had postponed. A desire to communicate more honestly. A need to stop shaping their identity around what other people expected. That is why their behavior may have seemed difficult to read. You were watching someone in transition. But wait, the biggest clue isn't their changing behavior. It's what they have stopped doing. They have stopped automatically agreeing with every expectation placed upon them. They have stopped believing that keeping everyone comfortable should determine their entire future. And quietly, almost invisibly, they have started asking themselves, if nobody else had an opinion about my life, what would I actually choose? That question opened a door. Don't skip this part, because behind that door sits the truth we've been moving toward. Your soulmate is not simply a quiet visionary. In reality, your soulmate may be a reinventor. Someone whose deepest nature is to transform. To outgrow old versions of themselves. To question paths that no longer make sense. To imagine something better, then slowly become capable of building it. For a long time, they may have hidden this quality because transformation can confuse people who only know your previous version. Someone around them might say, "You've changed." And perhaps they have. But change isn't always losing yourself. Sometimes change is finally meeting yourself. Think about that carefully. The person you originally encountered may have been standing between an identity created by expectation and an identity created by choice. Now those two versions are separating. And the second one is becoming stronger. You might miss the turning point if you leave here, because their next realization is even more important. They are discovering that reinvention means nothing if it is performed for another person. So this isn't about them becoming whatever they think you want. It is the opposite. They are learning to become more genuine whether anyone applauds them or not. And strangely, that may be exactly why the connection feels different now. The less they pretend, the clearer everything becomes. Their priorities. Their emotions. Their direction. Even the people they genuinely value. There was once a version of your soulmate who could postpone difficult conversations indefinitely. The emerging version wants clarity. There was once a version who could hide behind uncertainty. The emerging version wants intention. There was once a version who allowed outside expectations to write too many pages of their story. The emerging version has begun reaching for the pen. Something huge is waiting inside that realization. Because eventually, reinvention reaches a point where private change demands an outward decision. And your soulmate may be approaching exactly that threshold. Imagine them looking at two paths. One is familiar. Predictable. Approved by everyone who only knows their surface identity. The other requires them to show who they actually are. No performance. No carefully constructed image. Just truth. Which path will they choose? That answer cannot be predicted by destiny, signs, or anyone else's wishes. It belongs to them. But one thing has become increasingly clear. They can no longer pretend they haven't changed. And perhaps that is the revelation you were meant to notice. Your soulmate isn't secretly some perfect character waiting to complete your story. They are something far more human and far more interesting. A person becoming a reinventor, standing between an old identity and a new future. And before this story moves forward, there is one final question they must answer. When the moment arrives to reveal this new version of themselves, will they finally have the courage to let you see it? But the next shift is something even they didn't expect, because reinvention was never the final secret. It was only the doorway. Beyond it sits a realization your soulmate has been slowly approaching, and once they understand it completely, the version of themselves they have shown everyone may never feel sufficient again. Something has changed in the way they imagine tomorrow. Before, their future looked almost predetermined. Certain milestones. Familiar expectations. Predictable choices. A path that made sense because other people understood it. Now, there is an unanswered space in that picture. And whenever they try to fill it, they keep returning to the same uncomfortable question. Am I building the future I genuinely want, or simply continuing the future everyone expects from me? Stay close. That question is more important than it sounds. Because your soulmate has realized that pretending isn't always about saying something untrue. Sometimes pretending means continuing to play an outdated version of yourself simply because everyone has become comfortable with it. They know how people expect them to behave. They know which choices would receive approval. They know which version of themselves creates the fewest questions. But privately, they are beginning to want something else. Freedom to choose differently. Freedom to communicate honestly. Freedom to admit that their priorities have changed. And yes, freedom to acknowledge that meeting you may have made them rethink things they once considered settled. But there is a crucial distinction. You didn't create their transformation. You revealed a question that was already waiting inside them. That is why this feels different. Wait till the final moment, because their next realization changes the meaning of everything we've uncovered so far. Your soulmate isn't becoming a new person just to reach you. They are becoming someone who can finally make decisions without hiding behind expectations. That means whatever happens next must come from genuine choice. Not pressure. Not fantasy. Not someone else's prediction. Choice. And that may be the most powerful revelation in this entire story. Because authentic connection isn't created when two people desperately try to become what the other wants. It begins when two complete individuals can stand honestly in front of each other and say, "This is who I really am." Your soulmate is moving closer to that point. The polished image is becoming less important. The hidden feelings are becoming harder to ignore. The future is becoming less about appearances and more about meaning. And somewhere between those changes, they have started recognizing their deepest identity. They are not merely a visionary. Not merely a reinventor. They are becoming a truth seeker. Someone increasingly unwilling to build their future around an identity that no longer represents them. Now everything connects. Why they sometimes seemed distant while thinking deeply. Why certain conversations stayed unfinished. Why their priorities quietly shifted. Why you occasionally sensed that something important remained unsaid. They weren't hiding one dramatic label. They were hiding an evolving self. And before you continue, if this unfolding story has kept you thinking, you can share it with someone who enjoys these deeper mysteries. Leave your perspective in the comments, and subscribe to stay connected with what comes next. Because something huge is waiting beyond this point. The question is no longer, who has your soulmate been pretending to be? The question is, what will happen when they finally stop? Picture that moment. They enter a conversation without rehearsing every sentence. They stop trying to appear unaffected. They stop allowing other people's expectations to speak louder than their own understanding. And for perhaps the first time, you meet the person behind the presentation. Not a perfect person. A real one. Someone with dreams still forming. Someone with questions still unanswered. Someone brave enough to admit that they are changing. But there is one final layer even deeper than truth-seeking. Because your soulmate has recently discovered something about you that challenged one of their oldest assumptions. They thought they understood why you entered their life. Now they aren't so certain. A small detail made them reconsider the entire connection. And strangely, it wasn't something you said. It was something you refused to become. You didn't fit neatly into the role they expected. You remained unpredictable enough to make them question their assumptions. And that left them facing one extraordinary possibility. Maybe this connection was never meant to give them all the answers. Maybe it